Hello, and welcome to the weekly teaching of Catalina Church North in Tucson, Arizona. You're joining us for our series titled Love Story. Here we're going to take an in-depth look at what it means to be truly and deeply in love with the Creator of heaven and earth. So let's join our speaker this week, our lead pastor, Ted Soderholm, and the message already in progress.
And we were talking about love. One of the guys was talking about how he had proposed to his wife and why she said yes to this is the lousiest proposal I've ever heard. And why she said yes, I've asked her many times for many reasons, but why she would say yes to this. We struggle with this concept of love because if we don't feel it, then we wonder, are we still in love? And then the joke, right? Love is a choice. But it's not a joke. That's what love is. But here's the basic premise that Jesus gives us about love. Jesus commands us. Jesus commands us to both love God and love others. But first, we don't have to love anybody until we first acknowledge, until we feel the love of God for us. Which is why we have to take the time to pay attention, right? But the premise that Jesus gives us is we love others because we are first loved. So as we're talking about love today, we're talking about one of the classic stories, and you're going to kind of wonder why this fits in with love. The feeding of the 5,000. You've heard this? Even if you've never been to church before. By the way, thank you. This is pretty traditional church. Expect this anywhere you go. And you've heard the story, the feeding of the 5,000. Right after this, Jesus walks on water, which is a really great story that we don't get to talk about this week. But the feeding of the 5,000, it's not even that unusual. Later on, Jesus feeds 4,000. So I don't know if he's losing his touch a little bit or if there's just less of a crowd. But in the Old Testament, prophet Elijah with a J, it's a drought. And there's a widow, and Elijah sees her out, and she's collecting sticks to make the fire because she and her son, she's going to go home and use the last of the flour and the last of the oil, and she's going to make the last cakes, and then they're just going to lay down and die. Because it's a drought and they don't have anything else. And Elijah said, invite me home and feed me too and you'll be fine. Didn't you just hear me say, we're about out? So no. You're going to die anyway. What's the difference? You have one less cake. Invite me over. So Elijah goes over and blesses what she's doing. And she makes the cakes and there's more. She doesn't run out. She doesn't run out. The drought lasts, I think, 7 years. She doesn't run out the whole time. Now that's a pretty good miracle. His successor, Elisha, see when you're a professional minister, you learn things like J is before S, Elijah before Elisha, right? I've been to seminary. And graduated with honors. Yeah, which was a real shock to a lot of people, I can tell you. Elisha then had 100 prophets that he was supposed to feed and didn't have anything, and he took what he had and blessed it, and it fed the 100. And now we get Jesus feeding the 5,000. But there's a fascinating part of this. When Jesus fed the 4,000, it was in the Decapolis, the 10 towns. And it's a classic oikos story, or oikos story, however, it's an ancient Greek word. You can modernize it any way you want. But the idea is household. If you are here today by your own volition, right? Let me just stress that. I do realize there's a percentage of people that are here not by their own choice, but it's the way to go, right? Because somebody's buying you lunch later. I got that. Welcome. Thank you for being here. But if you're here on purpose, the reason you're here is because somebody made the introduction. Jesus, you, Jesus. And you watched them and thought, you seem to believe it, seems to make a difference in your life. I want what you have, and you're telling me it's Jesus? Okay. Even if you're just invited here because of lunch later, same thing. The only reason you're here is because someone is inviting you to be here and they use some kind of strong arm tactic, right? But still, oikos means household. The way we meet Jesus, the way we get who the God of the universe is usually through somebody in our household, our circle of influence. These 8 to 15 people that know us really well. It's not endless. Not everybody knows us well, thankfully. But somebody knows us well. Even if you're just sitting there and you feel incredibly lonely, which is pretty typical in our connected, disconnected world. If you were to think, you could come up with 8 people that if you didn't show up the next time you were supposed to be somewhere, they would notice. They might not alert authorities right away, but they would notice. So it's this oikos story of the feeding of the 4,000. Jesus goes over to the 10 towns, and there's an insane man. He's demon-possessed. Nobody wants to be around him. He's really strong. They try to chain him up, and he breaks the chains. I'm doing a little working out. I don't think I could break a chain. If the string were frayed, I think I could do some damage to that, right? But breaking the chains is pretty good. And Jesus heals him. And the guy's all impressed. And Jesus says, you're demon-possessed, sends the demons to a herd of pigs right over there. Pigs don't go for that kind of nonsense. They charge right off the cliff and drown. The demons did not plan ahead. I don't know that demons put a lot of thought into the next behavior action, really, when you think about it. And then the guy who was insane is now healed. And he said to Jesus, I want to follow you. I want to be a disciple. Yeah, wouldn't you? And Jesus said, nope, don't come with me. Go home and tell your friends and family what happened. Show them what happened. And the guy said, okay, sure, I can do that. Feel a little rejected, but sure, I can do that. So he walks into one of the 10 towns, and he's telling everybody knows this guy. He's a nut. And now he's not. And he's saying, yeah, Jesus did it. Who? Jesus. Where is he? I don't know. Got in a boat. He walked over to it and got in the boat. And he left. And the two things that happened. One, some people were really upset about the pigs. Understandably so, right? I'm all for pork chops, right? Bacon fans, right? You want the source of that being sent over a cliff? No. So first of all, people were a little upset over the pigs. But eventually, Jesus comes back, and 4,000 people follow him around for 3 days because of that one guy. Would have been 4,100 people, but they were all upset about the 100 pigs, right? So they didn't come. But 4,000 people follow Jesus around, and he feeds them. But here's the one that happened first, the feeding of the 5,000. Jesus said, they've been working. And Jesus said, let's go off by ourselves to a quiet place and rest a while. He said this because there were so many people coming and going that Jesus and his apostles didn't even have time to eat. Sabbath. God invented the weekend. Why are we so convinced that if we will do what God wants us to do, our life's going to be terrible? God invented the weekend. And if we don't Sabbath, we have high blood pressure, we have stress, we have family relationships falling apart. The key to success is to do what you should do when you should do it. Do what you need to when you need to. That's the key to success, right? One of the things we need to do is rest. Sabbath. Even Jesus. So they left by boat for a quiet place where they could be alone. Jesus and the 12. There's a time to work, a time to rest. Even if it doesn't always turn out restful, you got to try. I assume, Chris, when camping with teenagers, that was nothing but restful. Kids who have never been outside before. The one time Jenny and I went tent camping, I was telling somebody this morning, it was our old church in Chicago, and a firefighter and his wife said, you should go camping with us. And we said, well, here's the thing. We've never been camping. I've barely been outside. So it's really going to be on you. It's no problem. We've got 2 tents. You can have our old one. So they set up their tent. They set up our tent. They got the fire going. They brought the food. They did all the work. Jenny and I just sat there and chatted till late. Then we're like, well, time to get some sleep. And then we got up the next morning and we had breakfast that they cooked. And then they cleaned up. And then we packed up. Again, I use the phrase we loosely. And then we're leaving. And as we're leaving, Jenny said, hey, is that a bathroom? Is that a gas station? I said, oh, sure, but we've got plenty of gas. Where we went in Chicago, it's an old Navy base. If you walk to the edge of the water, you can see downtown Chicago, right? It's not the most outdoorsy, but it works. And they said, oh, we've only driven 8 miles. We don't need any gas. And Jenny said, I actually need to make a stop. And so I assumed she needed chocolate. And so when she came back and she didn't have the chocolate, I said, what happened? She said, I had to pee. And I said, we all just went. They've got an outhouse. They've got, toilets and everything. It's not, digging a trench. It's right there. They've got a door and everything. I said, you went 3 times. And she said, I know, but every time I went, there were spiders in it, so I haven't gone in 24 hours. So those Sabbath opportunities sometimes work, right? Sometimes don't work. But we have to plan in Sabbath. And so Jesus himself said, it's time to Sabbath. Verse 33, but many people recognize them. Jesus is having a pretty good wave of popularity right now. The thing about being really popular, right, is everything that goes up can come down. It's good to not be that popular sometimes. So Jesus was riding a wave of popularity because he was going places and he was healing people. He was making a difference. So people recognized them. And they saw them leaving in the boat. People from many towns ran ahead along the shore and got there ahead of them. Jesus saw the huge crowd, as he stepped from the boat, and he had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. Remember that phrase, like sheep without a shepherd. If you were to say my favorite psalm is, most people would say my favorite psalm is Psalm 23. If you've never read the Psalms, I am working to read the Psalms. I'm a professional minister. I've been a professional minister for 21 years. I have to work to read the Psalms because they're poems. And who likes poetry? Nobody. Unless you wrote it yourself. And if you did, please don't share it with anybody. Can I get an amen? We used to have a professional author in Midtown, and she said, I've recently gotten published. The whole book got published. And I said, oh, great. So she gave me a signed copy, and I opened it up, and it's all poems. I was going to read it, but now I'm not. It doesn't even rhyme. So Psalm 23, the poetry of the Bible, the Psalms, Psalm 23, it's all about the shepherd taking care of us. And so Jesus saw they were sheep without a shepherd. So he began teaching them many things. Now, the whole sheep thing isn't really a compliment. Sheep on their own really can't find water. How dumb do you have to be that you can't find water? You want to know what? Amen, right? Unless you're in the desert, then good luck. They can't find food. If you're a sheep, you know what you have to do to find food? Look down, right? You're standing on it right now. How tough can it be for a sheep to find food? But I am assured that sheep are not good at finding food because they will eat it down past where it can grow again. Apparently, some animals, whether it's on their own or just their lips are too big, something I can relate to, they can't chew the grass down that far. And so then they move on and the grass grows. But sheep will eat it down to where it's gone. So sheep will kill their own food source, not put it together because they're sheep. And then not be able to realize that, if we do this, we can get more, they can't figure out the food thing. And you know why? Because they're petrified all the time. Things will come and grab the sheep. One of my favorite Bugs Bunny cartoons is the one that doesn't even have Bugs Bunny in it, right? The dog comes, hey, Ralph, hey, Bob, and they check in, the sheepdogs. Remember this one? And the sheep are just eating, and the coyote, who is dumb, just comes and takes them all. Never once do the sheep move. And then the dog has to go get the sheep and bring them back. They are sheep without a shepherd. Birds. There are certain birds that can steal a sheep. I mean, we've got a 1-year-old and live in the desert, right? So we've got the same problem. But those Harris hawks will take her right away. But the sheep thing isn't a compliment. The thing about sheep, they need a shepherd. They need guidance. The creator of life just said, we need guidance. And as much as we love personal freedom, the truth is we could use some guidance, a good insight to remember. All-time favorite psalm, Psalm 23, and this is the topic. Verse 35, late in the afternoon, Jesus' disciples, came to him and said, this is a remote place. Like Jesus doesn't know where he is. He did invent it, right? I did create this. See that hill? You wouldn't believe how long it took me to sculpt that hill. Forever. I had to use water. And it's already getting late. Send the crowds away so they can go to the nearby farms and villages and buy something to eat. This is logical, but Jesus has something bigger in mind. And Jesus said, you feed them. You do it. Maybe you've had an unreasonable boss. At this moment, Jesus seems like an unreasonable person to follow. And then listen to this next phrase. Are they angry or just shocked? With what? They asked. Jesus, you feed them. With what? What, are you acting like you're married to Jesus now? That's not how you talk to normal people. You only talk this way to who? Parents, spouses. Can I get an amen? Feeling very comfortable with Jesus. With what, they asked. We'd have to work for months to earn enough money to buy food for what? All these. And I say, anytime you can use a variation of the phrase, you people, you're really working to build the bridge, right? To create unity. You people, anytime you can use that. I think years and years ago, Ross Perot might have been elected, which was fascinating to watch, right? But he kept using the phrase, you people. Well, you can't talk and use the phrase, you people. But it is funny when you hear somebody say, you people, because there's no bridge there. There's no unity with you people. And that's what they just said, was we'd have to work for months to get enough money for these people. Why would I put myself out for these people is the basic question. And then it gets better. Jesus said, how much bread do you have? Me? I got nothing. I'm on vacation, remember? The whole Sabbath thing you were all talking about. We were all Sabbathy just a minute ago. And then everybody showed up. First of all, they ruined our vacation. Now they want our money. Let's send these people away. How much bread do you have? Jesus asked. Go and find out. Go and find out. There's 5,000 men is what it says, plus their families. This is a big crowd. That's a lot of people. And Jesus just said, go find out how much bread there is. They came back and reported, we have 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. Okay, good. I thought we didn't have enough. That's good. Now, this is Mark we're reading from. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the Gospels, the way the New Testament starts telling the story of Jesus. And Matthew and John were eyewitnesses. They were friends of Jesus. Matthew and John. Luke talked to the eyewitnesses. He was a doctor, and as he began to believe the Apostle Paul later on, he went back and did the research to find out about the Jesus person. He never met Jesus. And one of the people he talked to was Mother Mary. You can see the early part of Luke. A lot of that is Mary's perspective. This is Mark. And Mark may have been there. He was there for part of it with Paul. And Mark may have been the naked guy in the cemetery on the Mount of Olives with Jesus. Said, and somebody ran away and they grabbed his cloak and he ran off naked. No, that's how you want to be in the Bible, right? Somebody seen your backside. A streaker from the 70s. It's in there, right? It's biblical. But Mark was sort of there, may have known Jesus, but a lot of this seems to be Peter's perspective. The next story in Mark is Jesus walking on water, and it is the one that does not mention that Peter got out of the boat. Because if you're Peter, that's maybe not a story you want to retell. As I took Jenny back to New York for the first time to meet my family, I was fairly confident I was going to take her to meet a lot of my friends. I tried to remember every single embarrassing story they could tell, to get a jump start on it and tell her from my perspective. So that when they told the story, it was Jenny could feel sorry for me. Her favorite was when one of the guys I grew up with, an Italian guy, quoted me as a little kid. We would all agree I have no accent now. Can I get an amen? It's gone. In that rich, godlike voice, right? Well, maybe I used to have a little bit of an accent. So he quoted me as saying, I remember when Ted used to say, why you gotta be so mean all the time? Okay, well, that was the old days. And I think everybody loves me now. But Peter doesn't tell the story of him walking on the water, and Mark tells big picture. He doesn't do the details. But luckily, this story, it doesn't just get told by Mark. And so we're going to make a quick jump to John. And remember when it said in Mark, they came to Jesus, and they said we should send these people away, and they said we'd have to work for months to feed these people? Well, it turns out it was this guy named Philip. Turning to Philip, Jesus asked, where can we buy bread to feed all these people? These people. He was testing Philip. And that's what you want, isn't it? That's the reassurance we're all after, that the God of the universe is just testing us on occasion, just to see what we're going to do. Not that God doesn't know, but it's for us, because we don't know what we're going to do. I don't know what I'm going to do next. I've put literally 12 hours into this talk. I'm not real confident what I'm going to say next. Can I get an amen? The testing of God is a real thing. He was testing Philip, for he already knew what he was going to do, which is just Jesus having fun being Jesus. The God of the universe is enjoying himself. My whole point on Thursday, talking to my mentor, big church, they had 13,000 people for Christmas. And my whole point to him was, I've known you long enough to know that you used to enjoy your job, and you don't enjoy it right now. You should go back to enjoying it. Because he's reached the stage in his early 60s, and it's a massive church, and he thinks it's his responsibility. He's got 120 people that he's responsible for on staff. He's feeling the weight of the world, and he's thinking he's reaching a stage where he should find a successor and hand it off, and maybe he should step aside. Okay, but do you have a name of someone who can bring in 13,000 people for Christmas Eve? Because if you don't, then you don't have a successor. So you know what you should do? Get back to work. That's what you should do. At some point, we need to enjoy what God is calling us to do. You know what your job is? Solving people's problems. That's what your job is. That's why you have a job. Problems go away, your job goes away, or you get promoted. Jesus, the God of the universe, enjoys his job. Is that an interesting little take? He's just messing with Philip. He's just messing with the whole human race right now. He was testing Philip, for he already knew what he was going to do. Philip replied, even if we worked for months, we wouldn't have enough money to feed them. And by we, I mean everybody else around here, because I'm not doing it at all. Then Andrew shows up 3 times in the Gospels, and each time he's introducing somebody to Jesus. First it's Simon Peter. And then it's a group of guys. But this is the middle one, brings a little boy. Then Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, spoke up. There's a young boy here with 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. He's got a Lunchable. That's what I found. Jesus, if you remember, said in Mark, go see how much bread we have. Go see what the people brought. Maybe somebody brought something we can work with. Apparently, Andrew was the only one who did this. And he brings back a little kid with a Lunchable. He's stealing a kid's lunch is what he's doing. In great faith, because that's what Jesus asked for. And then look at this. Look what Andrew says. He shows up 3 times in the Bible, and Andrew each time is introducing people to Jesus. And look what he says. Ever so close. There's a young boy here with 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But what good is that with this huge crowd? So close. Did you ever get close on having faith? Do you ever feel like, oh yeah, I'm in the zone? Nope, no I don't. Not at all. Terrified. Concerned, what's next? Read the headlines. The sky is falling. You go to work. Somebody at home talks to you. And you're just terrified. You think, oh, man, just for a fleeting moment there, I thought I had faith. I really trusted the God of the universe was going to win, but it's gone now. Well, that's what we just have here. Just bring the food and shut up. I'm from New York. This is a lesson I struggle with. I'm 49 years old. I've made very little progress on that. There are times you just need to shut your fool mouth. Jesus, you asked how much there was out there. This is what I found. This is Bobby, and if you want, you can take his lunch from him. He could have said that and then zipped it up. You know one of the greatest things that I've learned from Jenny? Again, I haven't learned it, but I have the potential to learn it from Jenny. Jenny is great at not saying stupid things. She'll just not say it. I try not to miss those opportunities. Jenny is so rarely says something stupid that we laugh about it for years afterwards. We could point mine out daily. Jenny said something stupid in band, she was leading the band. The hot chick in the middle here, that's mine, by the way. And she'll be at the piano for the last song. Oh, it's a good last song. And 11 hours to go. We got to get there, though, right? And she said something in band practice. Somebody brought a legitimate concern. She led the way of the whole band just mocking them. I did take the person out to lunch a couple weeks later and deal through therapy, right? I mean, what are you doing? She came home and I said, that was band practice. She said, oh man, it was great except for one thing. I said, well, what was the one thing? She said, well, somebody had an actual concern and I didn't notice it, and so I just made fun of them and everybody made fun of them, and I thought about 20 minutes later, that was an actual concern they were bringing to the group. We still laugh about it because Jenny saying something stupid is so rare. We actually have a board that we put up at our house. Mine would have to be an Etch-a-Sketch, right? We're just taking it off all the time. But we take hope in people that we look up to not getting any better. My mentor, the one I told he should enjoy his job more, he has 3 great kids, he and his wife. And when we had our first one, we get the brand new kid and they let you walk out of the hospital with it, right? Pretty irresponsible on their part, we all agree. And I said, so give me your best parenting advice. And he said, here's the thing. The little kid years are stressful because they're dumb. And then the middle years are stressful because they won't listen to you. And you realize, I'm about done with them. They're leaving the house and they're complete morons. He said, that's what's stressful about teenagers. And he said, and now my kids are all in their 20s, early 30s. They're married to great people. They have kids of their own. And he said, this is the most stressed out I've ever been with my kids. Because I realized they all had this great thing. And one dumb mistake can wipe it all out. And he said, and I've got less control over them now than I ever did. And I said, so that's your advice? And he said, well, somewhere in there you got to enjoy it. And I said, well, give me an example of why it's so difficult. And he said, I'll give you one. We were just talking about this the other day. So his son lives up in Phoenix. On occasion, he'll come down and I get to see him. Great kid, great guy, 32 kid. I'm 49. It's not like I'm 90, right? Oh, these kids today, their rap music. And so Drew, great kid, going to a Christian school, basketball star, but Tom, my mentor, felt like he wasn't putting enough effort in academically. Something maybe your parents felt. My parents would have felt that, but I was the youngest of 6, and they no longer cared, right? Don't be arrested. That was the rule in our house. They seemed pretty firm on that one. The rest was fairly negotiable. And he said, so it was before a Saturday night service. I told you it's a mega church, right? It's enormous. And so Tom has to go preach 2 Saturday night services and then 4 on Sunday. And it's Saturday night before he leaves. And so his wife, he's getting ready, and his wife said, I'm frustrated that Drew's not working harder. And so Tom said, okay, I'm going to go in. I'm just going to have a little talk with him. 30 minutes later, he comes out. He's been screaming. They've been having this shouting match for 30 minutes. Tom is red-faced. He's bald, so his whole head is red. And his voice is all scratchy. And he said, I came out, and my wife wouldn't even look at me. She was just shaking her head. And I said, what'd you do next? And he said, well, I spent most of the Saturday night services explaining what had just happened and asking forgiveness from about 3,000 strangers. And I said, when did you mention it to Drew? He said, well, the next day I mentioned it to Drew, that maybe I didn't take the best approach. And I said, Tom, I'm struggling to find your parenting wisdom in here. And he sat there for a moment. He said, now that you mentioned it, I think mostly you should talk to my wife. Well, I find as a parent that is helpful. As a Christian, I find Andrew helpful. He shows up 3 times. All 3 times he's introducing people to Jesus. He's got a connection to Jesus. He believes in Jesus at some level, that people should meet Jesus. And yet when he's got the time, this is the most he says in all of the Gospels. There's a young boy here with 5 barley loaves and 2 fish, but what good can that possibly be? And Jesus says, thank you for your support. Thank you for your confidence. What are the odds that God can provide? It's our lack of faith in God providing that makes us, I got to get mine. And it's not enough. And we make us hoarders. The lady in Tennessee, they didn't get out of her house for a year. She didn't get out of her chair for a year. Have you read this story? Her flesh bonded to the chair. Every time I go and sit with my in-laws, I feel this happening, but it's technically not happened yet. Just disappearing as a person. And the story that I read a lot of headlines. This story I actually read. I'm going to read this one. And there's a church volunteer. It's Tennessee, right? You have to go to church. It's part of the contract. So everybody goes, and there's somebody from church coming and helping this woman by delivering food regularly. And finally, he noticed that I haven't seen her move out of that chair since June of 2016. And so he talks to somebody, and they feel alarmed, and they go over, and the smell is such that they can smell it from outside. When the authorities came, they had to put on hazmat suits. We have a 1-year-old. Her room is similar, right? That diaper genie ain't so smart in our house. I don't know. But they then went to the church volunteer for the interview, and they said, did you notice she hadn't moved? And he said, yeah, she hadn't been out of that chair since June. I finally mentioned it to somebody. And they said, what about the smell? And he said, oh yeah, it always smells like that. What are you, a bachelor? You don't even notice? We get to that point, and one of the neighbors said, we didn't notice she hadn't moved, but we noticed she was a hoarder, and every time you go in, there's just loads of stuff. And so we assumed she hadn't moved because every time we went in, because it was a big deal to move. We didn't realize she hadn't moved since June, but she was a hoarder. Well, why would we do that? Well, because we have that mentality. God can provide. I've got to make sure I get mine first. Back to Mark. Then Jesus told the disciples to have people sit down in groups on the green grass. So they sat down in groups of 50 or 100. Psalm 23, the Lord is my what? Shepherd. I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures like grass. Jesus took the 5 loaves and 2 fish, looked up toward heaven and blessed them. We want God to give us more. And Jesus said, will you be thankful for what you have, and let's start there. Then breaking the loaves into pieces, he kept giving the bread to the disciples so they could distribute it to the people. It's bread. He's got it. It's 5 loaves. He blesses it, and then he starts handing it out. And it never ends. He just keeps handing it out. It's like a clown car. It just won't end. It just keeps coming. How many more people are in there? How much more bread you got in that basket? Gave it to the disciples so they could distribute it to the people, 5,000 plus their families. He also divided the fish for everyone to share. They had to start with what they were given by Jesus. Total dependence can be surprisingly fun because he can amaze us. The God of the universe can surprise us. But they also had to do their part. We can't just sit in the chair since June and wait. We do have to do what we can with what we have and trust this is going to end well. You know where we struggle with this as Americans? Well, there's a whole list, but ever read the list, how much we don't put into our retirement accounts? Well, we're either pretty convinced we're going to die at 62, we're convinced that Social Security is going to have a strong uptick, or what's the third one? Do your IRA, people. Put it in the market. We are so concerned with what we currently have, we don't feel like we have the extra to save for tomorrow. I want to make sure I get mine first. I mean, we do have cell phones. We got cable. We got the big TV. We got a nice couch. We got the surround sound system. But besides that, we really struggle with the basics. Well, the car's new, and we need a new couch. But beyond that, well, the clothes. We got to go out to eat a lot. It's not enough that I eat. I got to have someone else bring it to me. Why don't we do an IRA? Because we struggle with believing that God will provide. Well, we got to do our part. We have to do our part. And God will provide. Yeah, but I'll put it in the market, and the market will collapse. And then you'll do it again. It'll do this. And then it'll do this. And then it'll do this. Because you want to know what it does? Up and down. That's what it does. You're going to have good days and bad days. Why don't we do what we can and then trust God with the rest? Well, it's the same thing that these guys are dealing with, that lack of faith. And look at this. Verse 42. They all ate as much as they wanted. A Lunchable. And afterward, the disciples picked up 12 baskets of leftover bread. We missed this one because we don't know the Bible at all. But there were 12 tribes of God's people, 12 groups. Everybody here got fed, and there's enough left over for all of God's people. The disciples picked up 12 baskets of leftover bread and fish. A total of 5,000 men and their families were fed. Feeding of the 5,000. 15,000 people, 20,000 people from a Lunchable. It's an extravagant miracle. Jesus walking on water is a funny miracle. Jesus calming the storm is a moving the clock forward miracle. I mean, the storm's going to end eventually. But this is just a flat-out extravagant miracle. And if someone left hungry, it was their own choice. Isn't it fascinating to think that someone could have left hungry? We've got the same thing now. We can have Jesus, but only if we want them. So picture this. It's that day, and you hear that Jesus is coming, and you've seen him do miracles, you've heard about the miracles, and you want yours, and so you get up, and you're in the Roman Empire. And the trouble with being in the Roman Empire is that Rome is winning, but the Romans who are winning, they don't really feel like they're winning because they're stressed out, because all the rulers have to keep the locals happy, and they have to keep Rome happy. And then the guy in Rome has people trying to kill him. So who's happy and relaxed in the Roman Empire? Well, nobody, it turns out. And then all those that are then the taken over provinces feel that stress. High taxes, limited freedom. That's where you're growing up. That's where you're living. So you get up one day and you're the head of the household and you think, I'm going to go to hear Jesus. And you go and you hear him and you're like a sheep without a shepherd and he teaches you all this great stuff. And you think, wow, I never thought of that before. I didn't know that's how it worked. And you're feeling all excited and then you're feeling hungry. And then they say, well, sit down. And then the guy prays, and then all of a sudden they're passing out baskets. And you have two options. You can take the food and say thank you, or you can say, no sushi for me, thank you. Why would you do that? Well, why do we do that? Because we get caught up in the day. No, I don't have time for this. I've got to head home. I've been here long enough. So now that you got the extravagant miracle, Jesus taught you, Jesus fed you in every way possible. When you go home, what difference does it make? If you are a spouse, what difference would it make if you were there and the God of the universe provided everything that you needed that day, and then you go home, you're full of wisdom, you're full of food, and you go home? If it doesn't make a difference, what was the point? And if your family is with you as you're going home, the 5,000 men plus their families, what are you talking about? What are you saying to your teenagers? What are you saying to your children, the small ones, the ones that weren't paying attention, the ones that got time out repeatedly during Jesus' sermon? What would you say to them? Hey, I haven't given the best role model, but I hope what you saw today is that the God of the universe actually cares. And if we will do our part, God promises to do the rest. Here's the guarantee: it will not look like what we think. You know the Lazarus raising from the dead story? You know what's disturbing about that? The fact that Lazarus died in the first place. He was sick. They sent for Jesus. He didn't show up. Jesus was dead 4 days. When Jesus got there, the sisters said to him, if you had been here, he wouldn't have died. And Jesus said, I'm going to resurrect him. They said, I know, the resurrection in heaven, great. And Jesus said, don't you believe? Sure, I believe. And he said, well, I'm going to go resurrect him right now. And the sister said, he's been dead for 4 days. He's going to stink. I'm trying to do a miracle here, people. But from our perspective, the complaint is that Jesus didn't show up and Lazarus died. We want him to show up. Lazarus first gets a little bit of a cold. You first see the spot on the x-ray. That's when you want Jesus to show up. You want Jesus to come in from the waiting room. There you go. But Lazarus died. There was a funeral. There was grief. There was a burial. And that's when Jesus showed up, and that's when Jesus did the miracle. So what do you say to your kids? You say, it's not our timeline, it's God's. Our part is to trust that this day, the God of the universe will provide what we need for this day. And we're going to trust that tomorrow is a day that he's going to provide. And then we're going to trust that at some point we're going to be so amazed by the love of God that we can't help but love others. Have you ever heard me tell the story of Oscar? Let's finish here. Oscar was a grumpy guy. Remember the guy I told you about? He took us camping, did a lot of the work. It was a friend of his. There's the oikos thing. The crazy guy that went and told and showed everybody, and so then they showed up. So at this church, it was an old building church, and it was getting full. And the firefighters started coming. We got the captain. We got a bunch of the guys on the team. I don't know. And so one day, this guy showed up with his wife. His wife was the purse buyer nationally, globally for Kohl's department store. That was her job. She'd go to New York and Paris and buy purses for Kohl's. Everybody needs a job, right? And they showed up, and they started coming and getting involved. And one day, that firefighter came to me, the one who had been invited from the guy who took us camping. And he said, hey, Ted, my dad's not doing well in the hospital. Would you do me a favor and just go visit him? And I said, sure, what's his name? He said, his name is Oscar. He said, here's the thing. He's not going to want to see you. And I said, I get that a lot. No big deal. He said, no, if he finds out you're a minister, he could very well be angry. I haven't even told him we're coming to church. And I said, why is that? And he said, well, I grew up in a Catholic home, and we went to a Catholic church. I was in Catholic school. And there's some falling out we had with the priest over money. And he said, I don't know what it was. I was a little kid, but also we didn't go to Catholic school anymore. We didn't attend Catholic church anymore. And I didn't grow up going to church. And now I've been coming here the last, few weeks. And so I'm asking, would you go visit my dad? His name is Oscar. He's in the hospital. He's not doing well. So I walk in, and he wasn't doing well. He was taped up to machines in the emergency, in the ICU, in intensive care. And there was a few family there. So I went in, and I said hi, and I prayed, and then I left. And about 2 days later, I went back to see Oscar again. And he wasn't in ICU. Is he down in the morgue? No, he's on the 3rd floor. Really? So I went up to the 3rd floor, and I walked in. And I said, Oscar, you know me? I'm Ted. And he said, oh, I remember you. Remember me from what? He said, you came and saw me in the ICU. And I said, yeah, but did they tell you I was there? He said, no, I saw you. Oscar, you're freaking me out just a little bit. And he said, well, they told you I died. No, nobody told me anything. You're telling me you died? And what do you say to somebody who you told they won't like you, and they've just told you that they died? What do you say? Well, I didn't know what to say, so I said, well, how was it? I've never died, but I'm told I will. Kind of curious. Got anything for me? How was it? And he said, it was good. He said, you know how they tell you that you're going to see family? You see familiar faces? I didn't have any of that. And I said, well, Oscar, I'm told you're pretty grouchy. Maybe nobody wanted to come and say hello. Maybe they didn't believe you were there. And he said, you know what I felt? I felt love. Now, this was a grumpy, old Chicago guy who hadn't used the word love outside of pizza and brats in decades. He loved the Bears. That's about as far as he got. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, I didn't see anybody that I recognized. I didn't see my grandmother. I didn't see my parents. Nothing. So we had a kid that died. I didn't see anybody. He said, it was just light. And I felt this incredible feeling of love like I've never experienced before. He said, you people always talk about it. You people, right? He said, I've heard you people talk about it, but I've never experienced it like that. And he said, and then I came back and here I am. And I said, well, I don't know what to say to that. And he said, you tell people to stop worrying. It's going to be okay. Well, all right. So I prayed and left. I asked his son. I told his son about it. He said, yeah, Dad went from being insufferable grumpy to now insufferable happy. Nobody knows what to do with him. He is kind. He's generous. He's supportive. He asks how your day was, and he listens. He's encouraging. He says, like I got a new stepdad. I don't know what to do with him. I don't think Oscar's died again yet. When the God of the universe says, love others as you have been loved, part of our job is to recognize that we have been loved. Would you pray with me?
Hello again, and thanks for joining us online. We're always excited for you to be a part. If you're ever in our area, please stop by on Sunday mornings at 10:15. For more details about our services, beliefs, and what's going on at church, make sure to check out our website at catalinanorth.org. We hope to see you soon. God bless.